So let's do some bold changes because I found a better way to save things, and it's actually far more straightforward. Close this. We're going to go and delete the entire graph node. Of course, that's going to give us quite a few errors. Let me reload all of this and open this. Remove this. We don't really need anything of that sort. Remove all of this actually. Remove the load graph as well on our helper methods. We don't really care. And let's see what we have. Awesome. I think that will do the trick, unless we forgot something. Okay, now let's open up the behavior graph, and we're actually going to remove the entire save state, all of this. And you know what, let's delete most of this because we're going to do some drastic changes. Set state, clear state. We might not need this. We might need it, we might not. So I'm just going to delete it. Okay. Set state, we're not going to need it. Just delete this. Return this false for now. We'll fix those later. And set node. Goodbye and goodbye and all that. Transition nodes, delete all of that. We don't have any need for all of them. Just add a region for helper or checkers and the region. So how do we save things? Now we're going to create a new class which we're going to call let's say base node, but you're going to say we already have a base node, and you'll be correct. So we're also going to go and delete the base node entirely. And actually, no, let's not delete the base node. Let's remove this. And we're going to make this a normal class. So let's go again on our behavior graph and delete this one. Now the only trick is that the base node needs to have, doesn't need to be a serialized field, and we're not going to use inheritance anymore. Neither we're going to use this. So the only trick for this one is going to be that all our the base node needs to hold references that are going to be used, for example, from the base node, from the state node, from the transition node, and all that. They're not going to derive anymore from the base node, but from scriptable object right away. Okay, let's remove the overrides, and let's see. Remove this as well. Okay, and we're now going to be removing most of this as well. So we'll see what we do with the reorderable list. I don't really mind at the moment, but what I need to have is basically take all of this and put them inside my base node. So cut. Actually, yeah, let's take this as well. So I'm just going to cut all of this and come over here and paste them. But we don't need to know all of that. They certainly don't need to see them in the inspector. So I'm just also going to save them as public bool. So ID inspector, okay. Everything needs to be public, so we can access them below. Let's put the stuff we need. above and hide them as well. So this will be our heavy class. And let's also hide this as well, these two. We know they are there. Okay, for now let's go on the transition nodes, and I'm going to comment all of these things out. You'll see why I'm doing that in a second. And the comment nodes, we don't necessarily care for them. And it doesn't derive from base node. Let's see. So whenever I draw my window, I'm actually going to be passing the base node. And everywhere we have an error, I'm going to be saying b dot. Okay, so that's how it is. And I think this one, yeah, this one doesn't exist anymore, so ignore that. Ignore that as well. That. So pretty much everywhere, as you can see. But trust me, it's going to make a big difference, especially how we save things. To be honest, in hindsight, we should have done this from the very start, but anyway. This is a little bit better way of doing things. Okay, so yeah, this one won't work at the moment because we need to add the transition, so you don't have a current state. So just say return null for now. We won't be able to do transitions, but doesn't matter. Just say return null. Awesome. So we have our state node, and on our base node we're actually going to go and create another class which we're going to call and say subscript. Actually, let's go inside the behavior editor, ignore all of this. Base node, let's call this execution or draw node. That's spelled wrong. Close that, delete this, draw node. Delete all of this. This one now is going to be a scriptable object. Create asset menu. No, we don't need the create asset menu. Let's add the namespace. Behavior editor. And all we need over here is going to be a public virtual void draw window by passing the base node, and let's make this abstract. Let's make this one abstract as well. Same with the draw curve. Draw curve base node. So on the state node, change this instead of scriptable object and pass the draw node. So we do need now the override. Back again. Dependencies need to go on the base node now. So hide inspector. And probably this also needs to change. So let's leave it for now and delete it and fix it later. State node, and we also need the override for the draw curve. And you need to pass a base node with a B. Remove these two. for now. Okay, so let's also add a create as a menu name, editor, nodes, state node, and on our behavior graph, let's go over here, we're going to add a list of base node and say Windows. Okay, on our behavior editor then, remove this list entirely, and we're going to be getting the list we have inside our current graph. Now of course that's going to give us some errors, but let's fix this and say throw Windows, current graph, Windows, and let's remove the, well, we're going to remove most of this, well, not this, but the context menu. As you can see over here, some of this needs to change right now, so let's put some comments and the entire context callback. We're going to remove this and we're going to bring this back or write it again even. This time should be way faster to do. And yeah, remove this too. Remove this as well. Actually, that's not going to work. And actually, yeah, we won't really need most of these helper methods, so we'll remove them entirely. Add transition node until down here. Comment all of this out. Let's see. Okay. And remove this too as well. Current graph. Remove those two. We actually won't really need this at all. Also. So, on draw Windows, which is over here. Okay, we pass the Windows, draw Windows, same with the curve over there. Then, I'm going to go onto the definition for the base node, and I'm going to add a draw node, which is basically going to be the type of the node we want to handle. So I'm going to say draw node. Actually, let's check first if draw node is not null. If it is, draw node dot draw window this. Same with the draw curve down here. Let's unhide these two so we can check what all these are. Okay, and let's compile now. Let's create some data over here, and let's say, actually I'm going to keep it inside the resources, and I'm going to also create another folder which I'm going to call editor, and in here I'm going to create on the editor node state node. Okay, then in my graphs I have my graph over here. I'm going to do one, and you can see that I can create a node from here. Let's say we want this to be at 550, and window title is going to be test window 1. Let's create two of these, and let's say this one will be 200 for width and height. Let's say 100 by 200, and 100 by 200. Okay, the order isn't really necessary. Let's change the test window to 3. But we don't have nodes anymore, so how do we assign the current graph? Remove that, and if we have a current graph, if the current graph is null, actually if it's not null, and only then we're going to be rendering our windows. Pretty much it's going to be the same for this one, so if current, for the user input, so if current graph is null, simply don't do anything, return. But we do need a way to assign our, well, to assign the current graph. To do that, on our begin windows, I'm going to say editor GUI layout label field. I'm just going to add some space, you know, from the top, and I'm going to say the GUI layout, just going to assign a width of 100. Paste that below, and I'm going to write assign graph, and beneath that I'm going to say current graph, behavior graph, editor GUI layout, object field, current graph, type of behavior graph. Okay, then it's going to be false if it's on, and we can also assign, if the GUI layout, the width, let's say 200. Minimize, open all of this, and I'm going to open the editor, I'm going to assign my graph, and here are two test windows we get, which will be, let's find our graph. Okay, so they don't really render anything, but let's see what happens if I drop, or not if, when I drop my state node into one of them. Okay, it needs to run the update, that's why we had those. Of course, the width needs to also be fixed, so let's say something like that, and then I'm going to add a state. And voila, we are back to where we were. But the plus to this is that if I hit play, and I will have to load back my graph again, we do get to keep everything without saving anything we had before. We do get to keep all of these nice things, which is really cool and really easier than what we were starting doing on the previous one. So, okay, if I wanted to change this into a transition node, I will just have to drag and drop the draw node, the state node, you know, over there. So let's close this and let's start bringing back our functionalities. So let's say we want to add behavior. We want to add a state node. Actually, before we do that, we're going to create a new script which is going to take on all our settings. So behavior editor, and I'm going to say create script editor settings. Add the namespace. Delete all of this, and this one is going to take from scriptable object. And let's reload VS so that actually loads the references. Behavior editor, Yeah, we want the settings, not the editor. Okay, and over here we're going to say public state node logic, or just state node, public transition node, public comment node, okay, and so on. Also public behavior graph. Okay, all of that nice things. So create asset menu name, editor, settings, and let's go now to our behavior editor, and we're going to say that on enable we're going to write public static behavior settings, editor settings, not behavior settings, editor settings. Okay, and we're going to say on enable settings resources dot load behavior settings, editor settings as editor settings. Okay, that's pretty much most of what we're going to need, but let's be bold and say I want to delete the current graph entirely. I have to go now back over here and say editor settings dot current graph, and well, let's rename this to current graph so we don't have to change a lot. And I think this needs to be, no, it's already static. Yeah, it's called settings. Damn it. Okay, settings. Let's copy this and add it everywhere back again. Let's do a paste and enter over here. Okay, current graph. So I'm only accessing stuff inside data containers. I'm not really accessing anything else or from anywhere else. I'm using scalable object the same way we did with the strategy pattern, where we just had data containers and then we were using those to run logic. The exact same logic happens here as well, which means we don't really have to save a lot of things or save different types and different things. Yeah, and this behavior editor current graph doesn't exist anymore, so that will be settings dot current graph. Okay, close that. We need to close the window though, let it compile, and let's see if this will actually load from here. It is inside the resource folder and it is inside the editor folder, and I'm going to create editor settings. I'm just going to call this editor settings. Current graph, we don't need to have something aside, but we do need to have assigned the state node. Open up the behavior editor and let's see where the errors are. I'm going to guess that the settings didn't work, so I'm just going to drag and drop this inside the resources. Close that and open it again, and here we are. So I'm going to assign a graph, and here where we back where leave, go back in, leave, go back in. I'm going to close Unity and come back, and I'm back. Okay, editor settings, let this get out of the way. Yeah, ignore all those things, don't really matter. We already have the graph, the previous graph we have selected, and the state node. I'm going to hit play. And everything happens as it was before. There's probably a few things that we need to change over here. Okay, that we need to take care of, but yeah, it's easier than doing all those other things. Yeah, we'll fix those, don't worry. Let's go and add the rest of the things. For example, let's go and bring up, and let's say, actually let's go and remove this first. Okay, there goes all our nodes. And let's say we want to go and add a new state. I'm going to go into my behavior editor, onto my context, to our context menu, right click, let's see, add new node, add state node, context, add state. Let's bring all this in. Let's close these two. Actually, no, we want the context menu, that's wrong. Context menu then, over here, and just add this. And remove this, this, pretty much these two. Yeah, okay, let's remove all of them. So, okay, we now have all of these. Where we want to add a new state, we're going to go and create state node, and we're going to say, actually no, we're going to create a base node, new base node dot current state, no, draw, let's see, draw node is going to be settings dot state node, and then settings current graph dot windows dot add base node. So yeah, that's pretty much it, how we add more behaviors. We should of course fix the width, stuff like that. For example, let's say base node dot width, windows rectangle dot width, let's say 200, base node dot windows rectangle dot height, let's say 100. Okay, and you should also say, whenever there is a context callback, you probably added something, so you can say editor utility dot set dirty settings. Well, just save the entire settings. Close that. Right click, add state, and here is our state node. Okay, we forgot to change the title. So base node dot windows title, say state node. Awesome. This needs to update, or well, you can just write state node over here. Okay, let's see what this is. Serializable. It's probably, it might be that we have a lot of references, or it could be one of these three that give us problems. I'll have to check. I have to search for this, so we'll see. We might have to create a few more data containers for all of that. But yeah, you can actually just encapsulate even more. For example, let's say, let's create another class. And say public class state node references. And take all the stuff that are only for the state node. For example, on state, all of this. Well, ignore the dependencies, I'm removing them entirely. On state list, okay. Serialize state. Previous state, current state. Yeah, remove, actually take this as well. Well, as you can see, we're going to take all of them. And I'm going to use public, or instead of public, no, okay, let's set it as public so we can change this later. State node. Actually, yeah, that should be like this. State node, or let's say state references. And then on my state node, I'm going to have to go and say b.state references. Okay, I'm not going to do all of that again in the video, so I'll be back in a second. Okay, so we have all our state references, so basically we just made it a little bit more compact, so we don't have everything on the same way. Let's assign a new state or something, and all of this is working as it should be as before. Awesome. So here's the thing. Most of the changes that we're going to do for all of this, yeah, it's going to be the same as transition node and the comment node. So basically all you need to do is go through all of this, save the logic we have into the base node as we did with this. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to spend the time in doing that on the video. I believe you can handle that. It's really straightforward how to fix this, so how to convert to this. So yeah, I'm just going to leave it as, I'm going to leave it like that. Okay, so don't worry about that. I'm going to put the project on a GitHub. Okay, so even if you can't write anything or you can't do the conversion, just check the description, you will find a link. And yeah, just save time, it's basically the same logic. We're going to remove most of this, and on the next part we're going to see how we redo again the curves basically. Okay, so as always, you know what to do. Hit that like, subscribe, and if you like to see more, and if you like to see more videos like this, then consider supporting me on Patreon so I can keep making more videos like this. I'll see you next time.